I'm Nexus. I make videos looking at the technical aspects of my favourite console games. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart looked incredible back in 2021, and after some updates in the years since launch, well, it just might be the best looking game to play or replay on the PlayStation 5 in 2025.
You think a crushing defeat is all it takes to stop me?
I mean, yes.
I played through Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart when it released, but recently replayed it after sinking many hours into Oblivion Remastered. I needed a change of pace, and Ratchet and Clank turned out to be the perfect reset. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is by Insomniac Games, the same studio behind the excellent Marvel Spider-Man titles. They released a bunch of patches to Rift Apart with new visual modes, extra performance options, and even a couple of settings exclusive to the PS5 Pro. And honestly, the visual upgrades impressed me so much during my replay that I ran a bunch of frame rate tests. So I'll be showing those off, plus some screenshots and side-by-side footage. Sound good? Okay, let's do this. Rift Apart tells a new story by bringing back plenty of familiar faces from the earlier games. I had so much fun replaying it, I actually went back and replayed the 2016 Ratchet and Clank game from the PlayStation 4, which, by the way, now runs in native 4K at 60 frames a second on the PS5. I'd describe Rift Apart's gameplay as a small improvement over the previous PS4 game. It wasn't a major evolution, but Insomniac cleverly covered this sameness up by providing us with guns. Lots of guns. This huge variety of weapons meant we could tackle combat in different and interesting ways. The arsenal mixed clever new weapons such as the Ricochet and the Topiary Sprinkler, which I loved, with old favourites such as the Warmonger and the Club of Doom. Enjoying the video? Give me a like, that'd be great. If you're interested in this kind of content, consider subscribing. Some games are good at showing off hardware. Rift Apart used the PS5's hardware as an essential means to tell its story. Rift Apart had a rift mechanic, which either allowed you to teleport between locations on a map during combat, or on occasion actually move between worlds. Rift jumping was basically a really rapid level loading system, only made possible due to that high-speed NVMe SSD storage within the PS5. It was a clever gameplay mechanic. The game was awesome because it combined this clever rift jumping with its other major strength, top quality visuals. When Rift Apart was released, reviewers said it looked jaw-dropping, a playable Pixar, and one of the best looking PS5 games, and I agree. It took the Ratchet and Clank visual style of its many previous games and brought that to the latest generation of PlayStation. Insomniac hit this rare balance, cartoon-style exaggerated motion with a high-quality lighting system. When Rift Apart launched in 2021, there was no PS5 Pro, we had the standard PS5. On release day, the game had a single graphics mode, Fidelity Mode, running at 30 FPS with ray-traced reflections. These reflections showed up beautifully on metals, puddles, polished floors, glass, and of course, Clank's shiny little metal body. Objects are reflected at half the game's resolution and do run at a lower frame rate. But just choosing ray trace reflections was a perfect use of ray tracing in this cartoon-style world. Fidelity Mode rendered at about 1800p according to Digital Foundry before being upscaled to 4K. Just a few weeks after launch though, Insomniac added two new modes, Performance and Performance RT. Performance mode targeted 60 frames a second, but was able to keep the same resolution by dropping the ray tracing feature. Performance RT mode kept ray traced reflections and aimed for 60 FPS, but achieved that by reducing resolution, sometimes down to 1080p. Even so, the upscaling was excellent. I'd only spot a difference if I was zooming in on screenshots, for example. Scene density was another factor that varied between modes. This is the amount of people and cars and objects in the environment, which was slightly reduced in both performance modes compared to Fidelity Mode. You can see this clearly in the opening parade scene, comparing crowd density in different modes. Note how crowd density scales as you approach the stands. Roughly 9 months post-launch, Insomniac added 120Hz support. One benefit of this high refresh rate is a reduction in input latency. When enabled on a supported display, Fidelity mode jumped from 30 to 40 FPS, though both performance modes stayed at a locked 60. Later, variable refresh rate support arrived in another patch. When used with the 120Hz mode, Insomniac said target resolution was reduced slightly, but frame rates became unlocked across all modes. So in Fidelity mode, I found it typically sat in the mid-50s, Performance RT mode around 70 FPS, Performance mode hit 80 FPS or higher, occasionally peaking near 100 FPS in my testing. Thanks to these updates, Rift Apart looks good and plays better now than it ever did on the PlayStation 5. We can play in Fidelity mode at an acceptable 40 to 50 frames per second, or remove the ray tracing and play it at 80 to 100 FPS, which is awesome. And things improved noticeably when we moved to the PlayStation 5 Pro. One of my main reasons for revisiting Rift Apart was to check out the new graphics options unlocked by the PS5 Pro update. Performance Pro mode, this was the default setting on the PS5 Pro. In short, Performance Pro mode provides a 60 FPS target, high resolution, ray traced reflections, and good crowd density. So basically, the standard PS5's Fidelity mode, but at a solid 60 FPS, but at double the frame rate. That's all made possible by the extra GPU power of the PS5 Pro and Sony's new PSSR upscaling tech. As with the standard PlayStation 5, the Pro also supports 120Hz and variable refresh rate, so if you have a Pro and a compatible display, then you can easily be playing Rift Apart with ray tracing at 90 FPS. And if you can do that, I recommend you do that. It looks amazing and plays so well. The smoothness, the responsiveness, the sheer joy of combat at this frame rate cannot be understated. It's just awesome. But wait, there's more. Fidelity Pro mode. If you want maximum visual fidelity, the PS5 Pro also offers Fidelity Pro mode. It is, of course, the best looking version of Ratchet and Clank on the PlayStation. It has a couple of extra interesting features I've not seen discussed online, which I'll get to in a second. First, Fidelity Pro mode pushes resolution much closer to true 4K and in some cases may even be rendering natively at 4K. Scene density is maxed out. Crowds and traffic density increase in some areas, even over the standard PS5's Fidelity mode, and fine hair detail is noticeably improved too. As for frame rate, by default, Fidelity Pro mode runs at 30 FPS, but on a 120Hz display, the cap rises to 40, and with VRR enabled, FPS can climb into the low 50s. Fidelity Pro has two interesting extra visual settings, RT reflections and RT ambient occlusion, giving us more control over visual quality. You cannot turn RT reflections off, and by default it is set to medium. When set to medium, RT reflections is the same as it is in Performance Pro or the standard PS5's RT modes. So objects are reflected at half game resolution and run at a lower frame rate. There's also RT reflections high, which gives us reflections at full resolution and with a smoother animation. Nice. RT ambient occlusion. RT AO adds realistic shadowing in corners, crevices, and where objects meet. It is set to off by default. On medium, it enhances standard screen space ambient occlusion for a subtler, more natural shadowing effect. On high, it adds an extra layer of screen space global illumination, which is light bounce and that subtle color bleed for extra realism. The visual impact of these settings varies a lot between scenes. Frame rate generally fluctuates between 40 and 55. Insomniac has said these RT settings are mainly for experimentation, and I love that approach. They didn't lock the visuals, they opened them up for players like me to tweak, to compare, and see what really made a difference. It's nice to see these options, but because they were not options available during the game's design, I think the implementation is minimal. I say this because it was actually quite hard to find examples of these ray tracing features in action, and also because I didn't see any drops in frame rate when enabled. I anticipate ray traced ambient occlusion to really have a hit on FPS, but none was seen. I noticed that Marvel's Spider-Man 2, which has a much more realistic looking setting, has the same ray tracing options. So after all these updates, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart has become one of the most technically impressive PS5 games to date. Certainly the most improved. On the standard PS5, it still looks and plays great, especially with 120Hz and variable refresh rate turned on. But on the PS5 Pro, it's on another level. You get sharper image quality thanks to the more powerful GPU and PSSR, more consistent frame rates, and full ray tracing across every mode. Fidelity Pro mode is a playground for visual tweakers like me, while Performance Pro mode hits that perfect balance for clarity and speed. Insomniac has done something very impressive here. They've made this 4-year-old game feel brand new. If you've never played Rift Apart, now's the time. And if you have, it's absolutely worth a replay in 2025. Let me know if you're planning to give it a replay or any other console games that got this kind of love and attention from the developers post-launch. I'd like to have. This is a table I made as I was writing the script for this video, and it basically outlines all the changes that I've described. Like the video, give me a like, that'd be great. If you're interested in this kind of content, consider subscribing. Alright, thanks for watching, cheers, Ram Nexus out.